I am Sabrina Walker Hernandez, and I am coming to you live because today is Thursday, and I posted my blog this morning, and I am very happy to be here. I'm Sabrina Walker Hernandez, and today is Thursday, and I posted my blog this morning, and I like to come on and give a blog summary later in the afternoon for those who haven't had time to read it or too busy to read it, because I know what it's like to be a nonprofit professional. But this week, I think you'll really be interested in what I have to say, because I wrote my summary around grants, and everybody always talks about grants. So I give 3 tips to award success. So here's my experience with grants, and I write it from my experience. So you put in a lot of work to submit a great grant application by your own admittance, right? You've done the research, you've written it, you've rewrote it, you've proofed it, finally it's ready, it's complete, you turn it in. All you have to do now is wait on a response. And it takes a while for them to respond to you, and you forget, about all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into this application. But it all comes rushing back when you get the letter, and it's a decline your award. So what do? I can tell you what I did the first time is I cried. I will be very honest with you. I cried. I took it personal. I felt like such a failure, and I swore it would never happen to me again. Well, the one way you can guarantee that it won't happen to you personally is you hire a grant writer and let it happen to them. That's not one of my tips to success. The tips to success that I put in there is what I learned from that experience is you cannot forget the human factor. Okay, and what do I mean by that? So I would make sure that I cultivated members of the grant making organization, and traditionally it was board members, right? So I would find out who was serving on that board, and I would make sure that I invited them in for a tour of my organization. I would send the information on our nonprofit so that they would know about us, have heard about us, when they think of us, it's a positive reaction, because it's the board that votes on these grant applications. Also, if it was like a corporate application like Walmart or Target or something like that, I would make sure I go and introduce myself to the store manager, and I would let them know that I'm applying, because they weigh in on the decision, and oftentimes the corporate will go with who they want to fund in their community. And so don't forget about that human connection. The second tip is, even if it's a rejection, you send a thank you to that foundation or to whomever it is. You send a thank you card because they did take the time to review it, and that is their time. And you're setting yourself apart from the other people who reject it, right? Because I'm sure they may not take the time to send a thank you. And the grant, but they will remember that. The other thing that you're going to do is you should pick up the phone and talk to the grant officer and say, I submitted the application, we did get denied, but I want to know your feedback. How can I make this application stronger for the next time? Have that conversation with them, and then you begin the cultivation process for them as well. You invite them in, if the timing is right in that particular conversation, you invite them in for a tour of your organization. You invite them, if they're in another state or somewhere else, you invite them to be a part of your newsletter. Ask them, can I add you to our newsletter, so that way that you are sending them information on your organization, the stories, you're sharing the stories with them, and you're cultivating them. You're beginning that cultivation process, because at the end of the day, they're still people, and it's still about relationships, right? And so that's one of the tips that I provide. And then the third tip that I provided that I think is really, really critical, and I think a lot of people that are new to grant writing don't take this into account, is don't put all your eggs in one basket. So what does that mean? You know, when I first did my grant application, I sent it to that one foundation, and I said I'll never do that to myself again, because if they say no, then that's it, right? But really, it's not it, because I can submit it to another foundation and another foundation. So remember that no is not the end of the road. But what I did to increase my success was I submitted the grant application to multiple foundations, right? But the trick to that is so that if you have two foundations that say yes, or two grant sources that say yes, you can't get there. You can't get the money from two different places and credit them with the same numbers and programs and stuff like that. You can't double dip, right? So to avoid double dipping, what I would do is I would Foundation A would get this budget and will fund this part of the budget, and they will also fund a part of the program. So for each applicant, for each let me say this correct. So for each application, I would have budget A funding funding program part A, and I would submit that to one foundation, and then I would submit to a second foundation budget B funding program component B. So what does that mean? Because I don't want you to be confused. Simply what that means is when you are asking for a program to be funded, that program has many components, right? It could be a program about empowering girls or mentoring girls. So you could have the component where you want to recruit mentors and pay, like, get marketing stuff for your mentors and cups and t-shirts and stuff for your mentors and things like that. Well, Foundation A might pay for that. But then on the same program, you want to incentivize the girls and get things for them, and you want to pay for the staff, and you want to pay for other components of the program. With that piece of the budget and program, I will submit to Foundation B. Same program, different components, different budgets. So if they both come back as a yes, that is great, right? Because now I can buy my mentor something, and I can buy my mentee something, and fund my staff over here. But let's just say if Foundation A said no, but Foundation B said yes. Well, my mentees don't get the t-shirt, they don't get this, but I can still buy the stuff for my mentors don't get the t-shirts, don't get this, but I can still buy stuff for my mentees and pay my staff and do all that. So that's the little tricks that I learned along the way. As far as grant rewards, so that I'm not crying, when it's not funded. But I will say this to all the grant writers out there: grant writing is not my thing. I can do it, as been proven. I can do it. I've gotten over the tears and really learned to write them and do them, but they don't give me joy. It's a lot of research. And that's probably 80% of the battle, is doing the research up front. Because as my great friend, who was my grant writer, Rocio Puente Mata, said, foundations, that's their job. Grant sources, that's their job. They want to give you money, but they want to make sure that their purpose is aligned with your purpose. So 80% of grant writing is the research and making sure that your mission and their priorities align. And then you do the writing according to what they want, right? And so she's very good about that, and she was very sharp about that, and she got it done. So the last thing I'm going to say around grant writing, which is not in the blog itself, but I am going to say this because everybody always talks about grant writing. There is a myth out there that once you become a 501c3, that you can then automatically get grants. Well, I'm a nonprofit, so I can get grants. That is not true. You are a nonprofit. It's just a designation. That does not mean you're going to get grants. Why? Because you're new. You have no proof of concept, right? The foundations, the grant sources don't know if your program works. You haven't filed your audit. Most grants wants a copy of your audit. You haven't filed your, your 99. So it takes about 3 years to get grant ready. Let me just say it out loud. 3 years. 3 years to get grant ready. There are some grants, like those corporate grants that I was telling you about, like Walmart, Target, O'Reilly's, things like that, that you can apply for, right? As a small nonprofit, and get those. Here's my recommendation for you. If the grant is less than $5,000, do not hire a grant writer. As the executive or the program person or whoever it is that has a writing ability on your team, and sometimes it might be a board member, they write that application. They can fill that out, because it's not worth hiring a grant writer for that. And if you are the CEO and you do the grant writing, in which I was in that position, doing something I did not like, but I had to do it because it's just the nature of the beast, right? Anything, I think for me personally, after I learned and used the tips, it was anything $25,000 and below, I would do. But I would say if you're new to this game, 5,000 and below, you do, right? And there's a lot of grant writing workshops out there. As a matter of fact, Rocio and I teach a grant writing workshop, and we're really good, let me just say. Because of COVID, we haven't taught one in a while. We might try to bring it virtual. So if it's more than $5,000 and you have the funds, hire a grant writer. Now, when you're hiring a grant writer, it is unethical for them to write off a percentage. So what does that mean? What the hell? Sorry, language. What are you talking about, Sabrina? What I'm talking about is you can't say, I want to hire you as a grant writer, and I'll pay you if we get the award, and I'll pay you a percentage of the grant. That's unethical. First of all, you're paying them for the work. They cannot guarantee that you're going to be awarded the grant. But the work that they do is your property. So then you can take that work and fish it around to other foundations and grants and all that. As a matter of fact, you get that one good proposal, you can break it up into many applications, right? And get multiple dollars. So that's one. The grant writer itself needs to be paid for their services, and they can't be paid from a percentage of the grant because it's unethical. Okay, so if you are looking for a grant writer and they say, I will take a percentage of whatever it is that is awarded, I wouldn't work with them. They're unethical. That is against fundraising ethics. So how would you pay for a grant writer if you are a new nonprofit and you don't have money? Hence my recommendation. Anything $5,000 or below, you write it yourself. You start getting some money into the door, and then you can work with a grant writer. Some people find volunteer grant writers if you have someone on your board that's willing to volunteer to do that, or you learn yourself how to do those bigger grants. And as you do those bigger grants and get more money in, then you can outsource grant writing. Or some people hire a grant writer on their staff. If you have the ability to do that, do that. That's what I did after many years, right? After many years, I got to the point where I was like, I can't do this no more. And I hired a grant writer, and it was the best investment ever because we then were able to go after state grants, and she was really good at that, building those collaborations and those partnerships so that we can get those larger grants. So that's what I would suggest. But that's what this blog is all about, the 3 tips for grant success, and I encourage you to read it if you have time. If not, just give your summary, and it is a good summary. By the way, no links involved this Thursday, and it's a great summary. But to get a little bit more details, you can read it. And if you are watching on Facebook, thank you for tuning in. I do have a Facebook group, and it is called Nonprofit Professionals Exchange. If you'd like to join it, I invite you. If you're watching on YouTube, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel, because I post videos up at least once a week. You're going to get these summaries at least once a week. And every 3rd Wednesday, I will post a webinar, and then I do an interview called Sipping Tea. And just to remind you, the webinar this month is going to be on September the 9th, and it is going to be around storytelling and fundraising. and it's going to be live on the page, and then we'll transfer it over to YouTube. And then on the 16th, I'll have Sean Hale coming in talking about operations, and that's going to be at 10 a.m. Central Time on this page. So Daisy has a question here. Let's see. What is a dollar amount range for grant writers? Okay, good question. It really depends on what you want them to do. I can tell you when Rocio and I worked together, we came up with, how we worked together was we agreed upon, she would write, let's say 5 grants for me, right? And I would say we negotiated perhaps where each grant that she wrote would cost me a certain amount of money. So let's say if she wrote 5 grants and each grant cost me $2,000, well, that's 2,000 times 5, right? So that's $10,000. But I was guaranteed to get those 5, guaranteed for her to apply for those 5 grants. And so how we determined which grants that she was going to apply for was just based on my input. So I sign up for Grant Watch, and for you guys that don't know that, Grant Watch right now has a free, not a free version, but free access to their grants. So basically what happens is you can go into Grant Watch, I think it's grantwatch.com. It's in the group, on my group on their platforms, but I believe it's grantwatch.com. And so what happens is you can go into grantwatch.com and it'll list all the grants that are available. You can even say in Texas, for college, for whatever that you're in, like mentoring, whatever that you're in, and it'll give you a list of the grants that you are on first query eligible for. But then when you click it and you want to see the details, that's when you have to be a member. So that's how they get you, right? But anyway, my whole point was I was a member of that, and then I would then snip that, send it to her. She would do the research to determine if we were eligible, because I hated the research. Absolutely hated it. She would do the research to determine if we were eligible. If that research involves getting on a call with the grant source, because you know how everybody has those calls to determine eligibility and all that stuff like that, she would do all that. If the grant itself needed letters of support, she would get those letters of support. If the grant needed collaborations and partnerships, she would pursue those collaborations and partnerships, because that's one grant. So she would do that for 5. So that's $10,000. It was well worth the investment, for as far as my time and as far as the work that she put into it. Really well worth the investment, because we're not just talking about writing the grant for $2,000. We're talking about researching, determining eligibility, if you're eligible, getting on those calls, doing those letters of support and getting all the entities to sign off on it, and then doing the submission, and it's just not the submission. You got to have a copy of the audit, you got to have the board roster, you got to have all of the attachments that they ask for, all that. She would put all of that together, of course with my help, because she would say, I need the audit, I need the board of directors, I need this, I need that, and I would just shoot her an email, boom, 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 here you go, and let her handle it. And then she would just come to me and say, here, sign here. She would say, read this, and I would pretend like I read it, and I said, good, sign here, sign. And then when we got the grant, I'd be like, what the hell, you said we were going to do this? Yeah. So I didn't read them until after we got awarded. And then I realized, she's good. We keep getting awarded for all these grants. I guess I better read these applications. So that's a kudos to her. If you're looking for a grant writer locally in the Valley, Rocio Puente Mata is a great grant writer. She's very reasonable, Daisy. That's really not a bad deal. 5 grants for $10,000. She's going to get the grants. So I encourage you to reach out to her. And if you want her contact information, of course, I will share it with you. She's very successful at that. But that's generally how they work. I've seen some advertise like for a specific amount, we'll get you 20 grants. We'll apply for 20 grants. I don't know what their success rate. If you're in the market for a grant writer, I always ask, the question you always ask is, what is your success rate? always ask that question. So that's what I would say. You're welcome, Daisy. So thank y'all very, very much. And that is it for me. And Marie, thank you for joining and for listening in. And thank y'all so much. It's been a day, guys. It's been a day. I wish I could share it with you, but it's been a day. But I really enjoy doing these blog summaries. So y'all have a good night. Thank you.